So my definition of religion, and I should just sort of preface this by saying there are books on this, right? This problem of defining religion. And it's important to note that religion is not even really a category or word until probably the 18th century. So it is something relatively recent. And in the early attempts to define what religion is, and part of it came out of this idea of this encounter with other cultures, in many ways through colonialism and that sort of thing. They could, travel to India or to China and see that they're practicing and seem to be praying to something, and they're going through rituals that look like something that we're familiar with in Christianity, say. What is that? And is that equivalent to what we think of as Christianity, for example? Early efforts to define what religion were. I mean, let me just sort of read you an example. This is a 19th century definition of religion by a Christian missionary. Religion is the belief in an ever-living God that is, in a divine mind and will, ruling the universe and holding moral relations with mankind. You can see by that definition of religion that essentially, this is Harriet Martineau, is basically projecting her own understanding of religion from within a Christian tradition and saying that's what religion is. But she's defining it in a way, and this was somewhat intentional, that would exclude those other traditions that we now intuitively would think of as religion. And in fact, that's exactly what, so religion becomes, we have religion and you have superstition, right? You have these made-up beliefs. So as the tradition has developed and it's sort of the field of religious studies developed, there's been long debates about how you should define religion. And definitions that I like, and I'll just share with you a couple. This is by a scholar named Livingston. Religion is that system of activities and beliefs directed toward that which is perceived to be of sacred value and transforming power. Or another by a scholar named Schmidt. Religions are systems of meaning embodied in a pattern of life, a community of faith, and a worldview that articulate a view of the sacred and what ultimately matters. What they're getting at in those definitions is this notion of religion as kind of a system of symbols that sort of fit together, and I can talk later about that in terms of Christianity, that has some communal value, but it brings people together in some way, and that it also functions to provide some framework of meaning and a sense of purpose. And then last, I would say it involves often something that in these definitions is defined as the divine or the sacred, something that transcends our mundane, profane world. But it doesn't necessarily define that in monotheistic terms or even theistic terms. So the idea now in religious studies is to have a definition of religion that is inclusive enough to include those traditions that we intuitively know are functioning and seem to be doing similar things to the tradition we may be familiar with, but are also not so broad that it would include something that we think of like communism that is more sort of political in nature. So at any rate, so those are two definitions that I would say I sort of like.